Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for December 18th, 2025. Well, the question is now in front of the world. Will the United States return to the guiding principles of foreign policy of the American Revolution, or will they continue to vacillate between serving as part of a unipolar order at the same time asserting a moral high ground? And this is where we're stuck. There are some very positive developments about the new strategic policy of the United States, which was released on December 4th of this year. And there are many people who are very pleased by these changes in the National Security Strategy document. So what we have to look at is what is positive and change what is not positive, because there are some problems with it, very serious problems. Now, let's start with the positive, the change that occurred. The policy toward Russia is now defined by normalization, working with Russia, achieving a diplomatic agreement to end the war in Ukraine, and then to move into economic relationships with Russia, as well as hopefully China and other countries, including India, Iran, and other so-called enemies, to achieve a relationship that's based on mutual benefit. Now, what's good here is that there's a rejection of the thinking that was behind the Russiagate policy, which destroyed or nearly destroyed Trump's first term. And that's what normalization represents, an end to the Ukraine proxy war, and the United States engaging in negotiations, not Biden-type rejection of any discussion. So this is good, and it's overdue after spending $300 to $400 billion on a war that resulted in maybe 1 million dead Ukrainians and is heading toward a permanent warfare status unless the Trump doctrine comes into effect, which means ending the war. The other prospect here is the turn away from the European colonialism. And this is a welcome shift. The United States after World War II, under Franklin Roosevelt, had a different conception from that of Churchill and the European states, namely cooperation, rebuilding, reconstruction, development. Churchill and others wished to continue the relationships of the British Empire, which is dominated by a geopolitical thinking which looks for constant disruptions of business as usual and as a way of finding the differences and heightening them. Instead, the U.S. initially was working toward mutual benefit, but this got hijacked after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So now we're saying, get back away from colonialism. The colonialism was the enemy of the American Revolution. And so the potential exists now to have the United States be a partner, along with Europe, along with Russia, China, and working together with the nations of the global South for mutual benefit. Now, what's crucial here is that the idea of the unipolar order and the rules-based order has to be thrown out. And Trump, to the extent he defines himself as a peace president, seems to be opposing that, especially in the new security strategy document. However, there's a question of Venezuela. What's going on with Venezuela? Why are we preparing for a war with Venezuela? And what was revealed is the thinking of Stephen Miller, who is one of Trump's leading advisors. And this was revealed in a document that was released, an interview that was released with Susie Wiles. And she defines Stephen Miller as the Trump attack dog who's primarily responsible for the Venezuela policy, along, of course, with little narco Rubio. Now, the statement of Stephen Miller is that Venezuela's oil business was built by the United States. Therefore, we have a right to take it back, especially if they're acting against us. The problem was, in his speech last night, Trump didn't lay out what the problem with Venezuela was. He accused them of drug pushing, of war, of disruption, but there was no evidence presented. And the evidence that was presented was just not accurate. What Miller said is, since we helped build Venezuela's oil industry, we have a right to it. But that's not true in terms of international law. So in the TV address from Trump last night, what was missing was, where was the peace president? Why was he lining up for a war? And the proof of why we should be prepared for war was lacking. The idea then, therefore, is which way will U.S. military power be used in the future? And what we're seeing with this political shift in Europe is quite significant. And in particular, it has the British totally with their panties in a bunch. You know, the British-U.S. special relationship is dead. This is what the British press is saying. This is what British commentary is all about. The Guardian, for example, wrote, "The nostalgic approach to a special relationship, which no longer exists, will not renew Britain." Obviously not. The King's College professor said the U.S. can no longer be relied on to defend the West and its values. Well, is he talking about British values or American values? There's a difference. The British still cling to an arcane imperial tradition, which is defended by geopolitical confrontation and provocations. And that is not in the interests of the United States or the interests of the global South. So what we're seeing and coming from Britain in these two examples is the same line that's coming out of France and Germany and Europe generally. You know, as an example, there's a Royal Navy think tank which says Europe must look for a geopolitical third way. There is no geopolitical third way. You're either an imperial nation that's seeking to usurp other nations' resources and their sovereignty, or you support the sovereign development of those nations and negotiate where there are disagreements. So reality is, if Trump stands behind this new strategic strategy approach, or this new document, the NSS approach, it's a giant change. And that's why there's such a freak out. So the question then is, why is Europe so committed to this? Why do they commit themselves to a war against Russia, which they cannot win? And they certainly can't win it in Ukraine. They lack the military force. They lack the economy in depth. There's no support in the population in Europe for this kind of war and this kind of military buildup. And there's opposition from the global South. So the question is how to overcome this old imperial order and replace it with something other than a new U.S. hegemon. And that's what we're working on. That's what the LaRouche organization is committed to. How to bring back the American Republican tradition in foreign policy, which is based on peace through cooperation, peace through mutual benefit. And so we now have the chance to turn the page, which is good for all nations, good for the whole world, even for the British Empire. The British Empire should cease to exist. It's cost the people of England enormous amounts of blood and treasure. And for what? So that the former queen could have 56 dogs, so that Prince Charlie and Prince Andrew can run around the world molesting children and engaging in their favorite pastimes, selling arms and drugs. So this whole order has to go. And that's the issue here. It's not enough to throw out some elements of it piecemeal. Throw the whole damn thing out. Otherwise, there's no chance to turn the page. So instead of preparing for war with China or Russia or Iran, the question is to move into a posture of cooperation as a natural condition for relations between states. Now, Trump cannot allow the Rubios and the Bush networks and the liberal democratic imperialists to pull us back into a liberal imperial world order in which the neocons have the upper hand. So we're now moving in a different direction. This has to be consolidated, and that's going to require your work as citizens to make the point clear. We as American citizens favor the idea of relationships based on economic development and principle, as opposed to thievery and disruption. That's the issue. So I urge you to join with us. Tomorrow is going to be Friday, so I'll take your questions. If you have questions on any of these matters, please send them to me and we'll hash them out tomorrow on the program.